Hey, what's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So, on tonight's live stream, I have the pleasure of hosting this very special panel of reef keeping rock stars. Tonight on the show, we have Mike Paletta, we've got Dr. Sanjay Joshi, and we've got Charles Delbeek, and we're supposed to have Julian Sprung. Julian is missing in action at this point in time. Gentlemen, do we have any clue what's going on with Julian? We've texted him and have not heard back.
Nope.
No Julian. Well, let's keep the fingers crossed that that Julian will be joining in progress. So all of these guys here have made major contributions to the hobby over the years, yet they don't necessarily agree on everything when it comes to keeping and maintaining a successful reef tank. Well, you know, if Julian was here, maybe he and Charles would agree on everything since they wrote books together, but that's neither. No, you guys don't. Okay. Anyway, not having alignment on everything is cool because there are many ways to reef, right? So there is no single blueprint for having a healthy, thriving reef tank. And one thing that sparked this get together is a difference of opinion on dosing ammonia to a reef tank. That's going to be one of the many topics of discussion tonight. But before we start chatting with these guys, I want to take care of some business and thank the sponsors of the show. My sponsors are really important to me because they make this show possible with their support, and that means a lot. I want to continue to bring on awesome guests to help foster this learning environment on the show. Polo Reef. Make sure to check out Polo Reef's new YouTube video that drops this Friday. The 900-gallon drop down has been a long time coming, and after the first one arrived, cracked, it's finally in place, and the progress that is made in a short time is unreal. Watch as aquascaping lighting and corals go in. Make sure to subscribe to their YouTube channel at Polo Reef for video drop notifications. Champion Lighting and Supply. Besides being a place for hobbyists to purchase saltwater aquarium supplies online, Champion Lighting is also a wholesale distributor for many popular brands. If you own an aquarium store or an aquarium service company, contact Champion Lighting through their website at championlighting.com to set up a wholesale account. Todd and his crew will be at Reefstock Chattanooga on August 24th and 25th this weekend. So stop by and say hello. And finally, a new sponsor, Polyp Lab. They're a supporter of this live stream, and I thank them. And Phil, they do their part by being ecologically responsible, using less plastic and more recyclable material. Reefroids is backed by science and uses 100% ocean-sourced ingredients. No filler, no OGM, no gimmick. Polyp Lab, straight results. The best choice for your marine collection. See the Reefroids difference for yourself. All right, guys. So I sent around a list of topics that was pretty extensive. I'm sure we're not going to. I'm sure we're not going to be able to touch on everything. But if there's something that is on the list that you feel strongly about talking about, certainly chime in and let's dig into that stuff. But also, folks that are watching, this is a rare opportunity to ask these guys some questions. So if you drop your questions in the comments section here in the live chat area, we will do our best to work that stuff in. So I think I wanted to start with a question, Mike, that you thought about that was an interesting question, and that's just generally, is the hobby as much fun as it used to be? Is the hobby as fun as it used to be? Does anybody want to tackle that one?
I mean, it's fun for me.
That's an easy answer.
Right? So I enjoy it. I mean, and if there are parts of the hobby that I don't like, I don't get involved in it.
What about versus when you first started reef keeping? Is there more joy these days versus back then, or is it different?
Back then, there were a lot more headaches too. You know, I mean, you're all learning, and there were a lot of mistakes made and stuff. So there were a lot more headaches back then. Now, there's fewer headaches. There's still headaches, but there's fewer, and they mostly turn out to be errors that we make ourselves.
I disagree.
You disagree? Okay, go
I
ahead.
disagree. I think your last part is true. I think a lot of this people bring upon themselves,
Mhm.
and they're creating their own headaches by trying to make things, I think, sometimes too complicated and always looking for the next best thing. And I think that's never going to change. I don't think, having been in this long enough now, over probably 50 years now, I can say that that's never going to change. People are always looking for better ways to do something and always questioning themselves. I remember, I'll never forget, it was a Mac, and I think it was in Miami. It was the first time I met Larry Jackson. Came up, showed us pictures of his tanks, and they looked beautiful. And then his question was, how can I make it better? I don't know. Looks pretty good to me.
Yeah, I agree with Charles wholeheartedly. I know that surprises you, Charles, but I think a lot of the issues we have are self-induced from us, always looking, and I'm the master tinkerer, and I've caused more problems in my tanks by constantly tinkering rather than saying, okay, let's settle down. So as I said the last time Sanjay and I were on, I'm actually following the master and Sanjay. I'm trying to keep things more stable, not monkeying around. But I also agree with Charles from the standpoint of I don't think it's as much fun as it used to be because, one, I don't think there's quite a sense of awe for a lot of us that have pretty much seen everything. And two, there's very few new things coming out. There's very little new technology. There's no basically new fish and very rarely a new coral to get us excited about. I mean, I remember in the 80s flying out to California and opening the boxes at Lek at the Aquatic Depot when the boxes of acros came in from Fiji, and it was like Christmas morning. I mean, I have never been in such awe because I had never seen boxes and boxes of acros before. Now I see them and it's like, you've seen them before. And what's funny is at that time, a lot of them were brown. I was still excited to see brown corals. If they had a little bit of color, it was like, wow, this is amazing. So from that standpoint, I don't think it's as much fun. And also from the standpoint of, I don't think there's quite as much camaraderie in the hobby as there used to be. We've all been friends for a long time, but very rarely do we add new friends to quote unquote the group, in that there aren't people that have that same sense of excitement and a sense of awe that would allow that. So from that standpoint, I think we're missing the boat on how much fun this is. And lastly, I think a lot of people look at this as a business where we never looked at it as a business. We always looked at this was a hobby. This is what I relaxed with, and this is what I enjoy, versus now I'm going to buy this frag for $500, break a piece off, grow it, and sell it for $500 and break even. And if I don't, well, then my wife's going to kill me. I mean, that's a bad way to look at a hobby in terms of having fun with it. What do you guys think?
People are still very passionate about their reefs. There's still a strong sense of commitment to it from a lot of people, right? Even if they're trying to sell corals, but they're still very committed to keeping the corals, keeping them alive, making sure that they're healthy enough that they can actually propagate them and sell them, and so on. I just don't agree with all the high crazy prices and names of these things, but there's a lot of enjoyment still left in the hobby. Otherwise, I would have been out of it. Right?
Yeah, I think also social media has really changed the landscape for this as a hobby in terms of enjoyment, because in some cases, yeah, it's fun to chat with people, but it's also not fun when you get into these arguments with people and things get nasty. And I know people that have, avoid social media like the plague for that very reason. And a lot of people that have very nice systems that you would never know about because they don't post anything, because they don't want attention.
Chris Meckley mentions in the chat here, reefer's code is important. That's something. Do we not see that kind of generosity anymore? The kind of, well, not generosity, but the trading. Really, he's talking about reefer's code is you're kind of banking corals with a buddy, and in case something happens, you always have somebody to kind of tap on the shoulder. It's like, hey, I lost that piece. Can I get it back from you at some point? Is trading, is that a lost art? Is the reefer's code, is that a lost art these days? Very few people practicing it in your opinion, or is that not?
I mean, there's a big group of people that practice it, and I hang around with those group of people, so I don't have any problem with it, right? Then there's a lot of people who like to sell stuff, But that's fine too. I mean, the hobby has got all these different aspects to it, right? And it's
Well,
not a cheap hobby by any means, right? So if somebody wants to supplement their income a little bit, I mean, so be it. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say bad things about them, you know, but
I
that's
think
what,
if you look at all the shows that are out there now, they're shows, they're trade shows. They're there to make money, and they're making the people setting them up are making money, and the learning and the lecturing and those kinds of things, that sort of academic side of it is kind of, kind of gone to the back seat, and not
yeah, because
become the main focus anymore.
now people think they know everything, right? I mean, it's all there. They've learned it all, right? If you go back to when we started, there wasn't much information, there wasn't much knowledge, right? Now, most people can very easily set up an acro tank and have it look good. Set up an LPS tank and have it look good, right? So in some sense, you could blame all the knowledge that was created has got us to the point where it's not that difficult to at least go through the initial stages of setting up a nice tank. Maintaining it long-term, now that's a different story.
Yes.
I was in Europe in June, and I visited with some people in the Netherlands and Germany and in France, and what the guys in Holland were saying was that, a lot of the online forums where people are talking there, all the talk is about the technology. There's a lot of talk about what technology they're using and this and that and how to do this automatically and ICP testing, and then he said they related how finally they would show pictures of their tanks, and they weren't very nice. The corals didn't look that great, and because there was so much, their take was that they were too focused on the technology and not looking at the animals and watching the animals and learning from the animals. That seems to be less of a focus than looking at the numbers and trying to meet certain numbers and targets.
Yeah, I mean, because those are easier to do, right? You just
But
send the
there's always
test
been a
in, you
downside
get the
with
numbers, and you adjust the numbers.
But we've always discussed forever that the goal is not to chase the numbers, that you run into more problems if you're chasing numbers constantly. And that's probably why they don't have as beautiful a tanks as they could. As we all know, your tank differs markedly from my tank, and the numbers differ markedly, but they're both successful. And we know hundreds of people that numbers all differ and they're all successful. So it's not necessarily the numbers, or as Charles said, looking at the technology, but still, I mean, I can look at my tank and know it's doing well and the corals are good, regardless of the numbers. But the numbers give you a precursor of whether you're going to have problems down the line. When you focus on them and you're constantly changing things to try and tinker and get the numbers perfect, I think that's when you run into problems.
Yeah, I mean, do we have too much data? Are we falling into a trap in terms of the ICP testing and making adjustments in terms of dosing things that we're seeing on those ICP tests? Is it just are we getting too far into these rabbit holes and making dosing too many things to our tanks?
Well, I think there's a plus and minus to the trace element stuff. One, I think the people that do the trace elements and do it well typically do a lot more testing and stay focused on everything and are very meticulous. And in that regard, when they're adding the trace elements, it's the cherry on top of the sundae. They already have a very nice sundae and then they finish it off. But if you're not doing it, I mean, that's one of the questions I always ask is, why was it seemingly easier, quote unquote, 25, 30 years ago than it is now for some people, in that we weren't doing ICP testing, we weren't doing trace elements, we were basically just doing water changes and metal halide lights, and we had a fairly good success rate. I mean, at least the people that are here, we did pretty well. So is there something we're missing, or is this just one step ahead, and is it only really an incremental increase? So it's not really that appreciably better than it was in the past.
I mean, what you're saying is that there's a huge range of parameters that the tanks do well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
And
we
we've
know
all
that.
seen that. We've all seen that. So what does it really matter then? If you are
Well,
within this range of parameters.
but Mike, in Sanjay, I don't remember 20 years ago seeing the colors that you see now. And is that
Right.
because even with the actinics on, I mean, you had green carpet, green star polyps, that would day glow green under actinic, but you didn't see the colors that you see now. And I think a lot of the focus now is for people to do these colors and looking at these trace elements as the panacea for that, and bumping color, making up the colors and making them better. In the Europe they refer to them as US tanks. These are US tanks, all blue and everything's glowing. And some of them don't like that, and they prefer a more natural look. So
The
it
question
really
is,
depends on what your goal is, right? Where do you get your enjoyment from, as we were talking about? For
Yeah.
some people, it's all those colors, and
right?
that's what they want to promote.
And these days with the technology and the lighting, I mean, we've seen that you can grow corals with all blue light, you can grow corals with white light. Again, there's a huge range. One, if you don't care about fast growth, then maybe the blue light's good enough for you, right? And you're more interested in the colors that show. Just because you're growing them under white light doesn't mean the colors aren't there. You're just not seeing the colors because they're being overpowered by the blue or the white light. They're there. You can switch to blue and you can see all the colors right away.
Yeah,
Yep.
Sanjay's take is a perfect example of that. I mean, I've been there all different times. In the daytime, when it's all white light, it looks like a reef in that it's all browns and beiges and a few greens. And then when he switches it over to all blues, it's like blindingly beautiful in terms of the colors. So it all depends on, as you said, what you're looking for, but also depends on how you want to light the tank. If you want the Windex blue tank, that's great. If you want a white tank, you can do that. You can be successful either way.
Is that the Windex blue tank, is that sustainable over time, I guess is my question, because you see a lot of these tanks on Instagram and sometimes I kind of wonder, are these one-hit wonders? Is this like short-term success? I don't see, personally, I'm I guess questioning whether these types of tanks that really show off the fluorescence of the colors, are they is that a formula that can be good in terms of that light spectrum over time? Will corals be able to handle that, or is it full spectrum lighting? Should there be a mix? What's in terms of trying to build up immunity for corals in terms of coral diseases, how does all that come into play? I guess I'm kind of randomly throwing out some thoughts here. Anybody have opinions on that?
I mean, my opinion is that if you look at what the corals absorb, right? If you were to look at an absorption curve of the corals, every absorption curve that I've ever seen shows the coral absorbing completely over the full spectrum. May not be as much in the greens and the yellows, but it's still absorbing 30, 40% in that range, right? So they are capable of absorbing all that light. You just give them blue, then maybe you're not giving them enough light.
Well, I would argue that just because they're absorbing it doesn't mean that they're using it. There's reflectance and there's absorbance. So they're taking it in, but we also know that they have certain pathways where they can channel that energy into the pathways they need it. So if you give them all blue, some corals will also take that UV light and they will channel it into a photosynthesis pathway where they can use that energy. So they have that capability.
That pathway ends at 680 nanometers and 700 nanometers, right? That's where it ends. That's the absorption spectrum for the PS1 and PS2. If you look at the photosynthesis.
But they channel that light.
They channel it down, right? So
they
take this high energy photon and they're able to channel it down, right? Channeling it down, that means they have to release some of that energy. Right, to get it down to the energy.
Well, that's what they think. That's what fluorescence is too, right? There's some
fluorescence is some of that, right? It's
Yeah,
basically bouncing that, changing the frequency of that wavelength. Yeah. So if you give them a lot of blue light, you're going to see a lot of fluorescence because there's less white to mask it. But whether the coral is using all that light or spending a lot of energy in trying to channel that energy some way, right? I don't know the answer to that question. And I keep asking that question.
You know, and it's the same with the nutrients and these trace elements because the coral's not just an animal by itself. It's a complete community of bacteria, viruses, phages, fungi, all kinds of stuff that lives in there. And there's a lot of evidence now that they're finding that these organisms are playing a significant role in the coral's nutrition by channeling these nutrients to them and also generating things like nitrogen. That's why they can survive in very low nitrogen environments, is because they have these bacteria that live on the surfaces that can fix nitrogen for them.
So, Chris
Well,
Meckley, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say that gets us to the whole thing. When you get to light, we all know that light probably provides 80 to 90% of the nutritional needs of the corals. The other 10% is provided by everything else. That's the one thing we're finally starting to learn, is it's a whole microbiome that plays its role in providing nutrition for the corals. And that's something we're just starting to understand.
I don't think we understand anything of it.
I said we're starting. I didn't say we're there.
Well, that's part of what makes it fun still, is
I
because
agree.
we don't know everything.
Right.
We don't know, and we know nothing. The more we know, the more we find out what we don't know. And we don't know yet what we don't know.
No, we don't even know the questions we don't know.
Chris Mesa says corals adapt well, but it doesn't mean they are happy. And Waterlog says ACI aquaculture surviving versus thriving. So,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that Sanjay was working at was trying to get his corals to spawn. So he was following a lot of things that Jamie Craig's was working on. I mean, I always look at the end spot for where you've been successful with your corals is you provide enough nutritionally that they're ready to spawn. They've grown big enough. They have packets of eggs and sperm. Their nutritional needs are being met, so they have enough energy. I mean, to me, that's the criteria of, are we providing enough? And I've had coral spawn, I believe, once or twice in 40 years. So obviously I have not mastered what exactly I need to do. And I know Sanjay's been working on it for pretty much a year and a half. And he has
6 months.
6 months, okay. But to me, that's the next big thing to work on, there is a finish line for that. And you can say, okay, the corals have reached this spot. They're big enough, they're nutritionally met, their needs are met, and they're getting enough energy and nutrition so that they can spawn. I mean, will spawning be a good or bad in a tank? That's a whole different question. But getting to that spot may be something to look for in the future.
Well, I would partially agree with that, because we do have a coral spawning lab here. And while you can get them to spawn, it's the quality of the gametes that's going to determine whether it's a good thing or not, because some of those gametes, they don't look good when they come out. You know, the eggs are all kind of shriveled. So that's the next step. Okay, now I got them to spawn, so I fooled them into doing that, but there's still something missing.
Right.
You know, it's nutritional or what it is, you know, or the nutrient levels are too high. Or in the case of ammonia, if you have too much ammonia, if you have prolonged ammonia levels, that can impact the quality of the reproduction as well, and settling as well. So there's a lot of things that go into it. So yeah, I would agree, Mike, that that comes from the freshwater hobby too, right? If you're doing something right and the fish are spawning, then you're doing something right? Because they've spawned for you. So they must be quote unquote happy. But when it comes to, same with fish, I mean, if they don't have the proper nutrition, they will produce fry, but they're not going to be very viable. They're not going to be very, fit.
Yeah, those are the frontiers where we need a lot to learn there, right?
Yeah, we're still in the infancy of that.
But if you get away from that mode of education and learning, then the hobby's boring.
Yep.
At least to me. That's what keeps me interested, keeps me happy, keeps me challenged, right?
All right.
Agreed.
So let's switch gears here a little bit. And Charles, I think you mentioned ammonia. So I mentioned at the beginning that there is not complete alignment among all you guys in terms of ammonia dosing for a tank. Just to remind folks, the use of ammonia rather than nitrate as a means for providing corals nitrogen requirement. The reasoning behind using the ammonia versus the nitrate is that there is some evidence that corals are better at utilizing the ammonia rather than nitrate to meet that nitrogen requirement. And by doing it, this would be better met. And while ammonia can be toxic at moderate levels to some fish, as long as small doses are provided over this time, this should not be an issue. So I guess the question is there any long-term risks with ammonia dosing?
Well, Charles just mentioned one, right? He said maybe the coral spawn doesn't develop well. Again, I have no reason to refute it. I really haven't seen any research on it. Maybe there is some, so that could be one reason, right? But as far as corals growing and being happy with adding ammonia, yeah, I'll say that, yeah, they're very happy and growing well with ammonia.
How long have you been doing it, Sanjay?
I would say it's almost been a year now.
Have you ever measured ammonia in your water?
No.
So you've never had it, but it doesn't mean it's not there, right?
No, I mean, I'm sure it's probably there with 60 fish in that tank. That could be ammonia.
Yeah, there's probably tons of ammonia that's being produced by those fish. So,
Right.
you know, and it's not new news that ammonia is the preferred source of nitrogen for corals because it's much less metabolically expensive to extract the nitrogen out of ammonia than it is nitrate. So that's not surprising. And you would think that with the amount of food that goes in and the amount of fish you have producing ammonia and the bacterial symbionts that they have, that they would have more than enough nitrogen to do what they need to do.
Well, when the nitrogen levels start to go down to close to zero, right?
Yeah, then you have a problem.
Then, you know, then I have to add something. So instead of adding nitrates, I'm like, okay, I'll add ammonia because it's preferentially more usable by the coral.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I don't tell people to add ammonia if their nitrates are high. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, if the nitrates are over 10, they get
To me,
negative
it's just a way of
effects.
adding nitrates.
Yeah.
So my question would be, if the nitrate is
nitrate.
high and you add ammonia still, would they preferentially go for the nitrogen in the ammonia and ignore the nitrate, and therefore your nitrate will climb even higher?
You climb even higher.
Yeah, that's typically what we've seen.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we only recommend if you're 10 or less, 5 even better of nitrate levels. And if your nitrates start to climb, cut back on your ammonia dose or do carbon dosing to keep it under control. But we also don't recommend it for people that have low bioloads in terms of corals, because then it won't be beneficial. If you have a lot of corals that are starving for a nitrogen source, then ammonia may be beneficial. But if you don't meet those criteria, then don't add it.
Well, the well water that we had in Hawaii at Waikiki. By the way, Julian's on his way. He had an emergency he had to take care of, so he's coming.
Okay.
The water at Waikiki was high in nitrogen, and it was in the form of ammonia. And it was groundwater. And Marlon Atkinson did a study back in 1994 where he looked at the nitrogen and other nutrients and elements going into the into those coral tanks, and that water coming out. And basically, by the time they left these tanks, they were stripped of everything. So once you got past a certain density, then the corals just take off. They suck up everything.
Right.
Yep. That's what Sanjay's seen in his tank. My tank is more sparsely populated than his.
Yeah.
But the growth rate in his tank, he hit seemingly critical mass for maximum absorption of ammonia, and they just seem to want more and more of it and are growing faster and faster. I mean, 2 months ago, he took out 6 boxes of frags, and 2 weeks later, you couldn't even tell he took anything out of the tank.
Julian is...
So Sanjay, was Mike at your doorstep then, probably, right? Wasn't he?
No, my partner in crime, Kevin, was there.
He sent his partner up there. Go get all the corals.
Hey,
There he is.
Julian.
Welcome, Julian.
forgive me, everybody who's watching. I just, had to be last, always looking for attention, right? Okay, let me see on the view. Can I get my background blurred? We're doing some construction, so I've got some things going.
Well, we're in the middle of talking about ammonia dosing there, Julian.
Yeah, right into Mike's freshwater planet tank there, right?
Yep.
Okay, so where on earth is the thing where I can...
Oh, blur your background. I'm not an
Look
expert
under
in
video.
Zoom.
No.
Look under video, go to video. It's there, right there. There should be a setting that says blur my background.
Yeah, I've done this a million times, but it looks different on this computer. Let's see. Blur my background is not actions.
At least on mine, if I click on video, it says, okay, one of the
So
options.
next to the video icon, there's a little upward arrow. Click
Yep.
on that little arrow.
Yeah, there we
It should
go.
say blur my background.
Nope, but choose virtual background is.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah,
There
go
you go.
for it.
Let's see, background and effects.
Put up some mermaids or something.
I'm going to put in mermaids.
Well,
Keith, you
we're
haven't used to
really
have your
digressing
background.
now.
Yeah. That was who was it? Helmut Debilius's Machina with the mermaids.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Why Julian is figuring that out. Let me read a comment from Rob.
Talk about real things here.
Yeah.
I may not be able to.
The very first Machina, Helmut Debelius gave a talk on the Red Sea, and most of it was topless women snorkeling in the Red Sea.
Yep.
Well, I'd probably get thrown off of YouTube if Julian pulled up that kind of background, but
Yeah. Oh, it seems to be frozen.
Never mind, Julian. Let's keep talking.
Let's
Wasting time.
talk and never mind the background.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Don't mind the
We
background.
don't care.
So ammonia. Do you use ammonia D?
No. No, we've had people wipe out their Windex tanks with
Right.
Windex.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. It
Remember
turns
that.
everything turns blue.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So ammonium carbonate, right?
Bicarbonate.
Bicarbonate. Yeah,
Bicarbonate.
of course. So bicarbonate is what.
Oh, that's why your corals are doing better, because it's like you have boosted the alkalinity.
Yeah.
There you
Every
go.
time, see?
No,
That's,
Ammonia is just a carrier.
yeah.
Sanjay used to run alkalinity.
Put ammonium chloride
Oh.
in and see if you see the same thing. That's
You
that's
probably
your.
will see the same thing.
Come on, professor.
Yes. There you go.
None of this probably will. Where's the experimental evidence? Where's your controlled study?
It throws my salinity off when I do that.
Oh yeah, your ionic balance gets.
My
You're putting
ionic
your
balance changes.
0.001 ppm nitrogen in there. No. Nice try though.
Hey, my ICP tells me my salinity is too high when that happens, you know.
So Julian, I think one of the
And your
questions
sulfates are low.
one of the questions, Julian, that I was asking these guys is in terms of ammonia dosing. You know, are there any long-term risks over time doing this? It seems like we're, you know, some people have just started. I guess Sanjay's been doing it for a year or what have you. Is there something that for those
Yes,
people that have started doing it?
There's definitely a risk if they get hooked on it. Somebody's going to come up with another technique, and they will be stuck with a boatload of ammonium bicarbonate in their closet, and then they'll try to sell it, but they're already past that phase, and nobody's going to want to buy it. Right?
So this is a trend.
that's why-
This is a fad.
This is a risk. Right. You know, Sanjay, what were you telling me about that other, you know, like shotgun approach? What did they call it?
Oh, that's the
Bolus method. Right. Bolus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bolus.
That was one of my
Yes.
questions for another topic.
Okay.
So
Well,
do not do bolus with ammonia, by the way, okay?
yeah. Yeah, that's how you bring phlegm up, you know, ammonia, and you make a little bolus, and yeah. Right. So I don't know. Your serious question was whether there would be any risk of dosing ammonium bicarbonate. And I can't think of one. It's not going to accumulate. The ammonium is assimilated rather readily by corals and algae, and the bicarbonate is utilized likewise readily by the corals. So sounds like you know, a worthwhile thing. I don't know if you know, when the ammonium is taken and you have excess bicarbonate, could you be pushing your calcium level down? We'll leave that to the chemist to figure that out, whether you need to somehow balance the bicarbonate with an additional dosage of calcium. So maybe you use calcium formate. I don't know. If you
You need
did.
calcium ammonium carbonate.
Yes,
There you
right.
go.
Well, if you try to put them all together, you're going to precipitate calcium carbonate and have ammonia in solution. So,
Perfect.
right, there you go. But, you know, you asked the serious question, long-term effects. I mean, if you were not additionally dosing calcium, maybe, you know, the extra bicarbonate is going to shift and result in your calcium level falling. You need to add calcium anyway. So presumably if you're adding kalkwasser, calcium hydroxide, then you probably, you know,
Yeah,
can.
but the amount of ammonia that's being added is very small.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the amount of bicarbonate you're also
it's
adding.
also going to be small.
Oh, you're not.
Yes, but
Dynamics.
once you get started, you know, it's going to want more and more, right?
Yeah, it's like crack.
Yeah.
It's like crack.
There you
It
go.
is.
Yeah, they get hooked on it.
You may start small, but then that's the risk long term. You'll be, you know, the bakeries in town are going to be running out of ammonium bicarbonate, and the bread's going to taste terrible.
Yeah, it's the gateway drug for corals is ammonium bicarbonate. Then you move up to ammonium sulfate and other forms of ammonia. It just gets bad. And at the end, you end up peeing in your tank to produce enough ammonia. So
I started with about 50 ml and now up to 200 ml.
Wow.
They're getting, they like it.
It's not a small amount in a 500-gallon tank, but what's how much?
Beer sales will go up.
Yeah.
I keep telling Julian to start selling this stuff. See?
Yeah, there you go.
Give me a little commission and I'll promote it.
Beer or the ammonium bicarbonate?
both.
Both. Okay.
Another problem is that it's like the freshwater industry where everybody was growing their plants with CO2. Then they sell it to somebody who doesn't use CO2 and everything crashes.
Yep.
So is that going to happen to your corals? Who knows, Sanjay?
I don't know. Mike has a lot of my corals. They haven't crashed yet. Mike.
There's my tank without any CO2 going into it. Looks like the plants are growing.
Yep. Yeah. There you go. But you didn't buy them from somebody that grew them with CO2. That's my point.
No, I did not, because I knew I wasn't going to run CO2. I'm trying to have as low tech stuff as I can at this point.
Right. Yeah, you and me both. My freshwater planted tank is the same way. No CO2.
No CO2.
Yeah, I've added a bunch of fish relatively recently, and it's rather noticeable how much the plants benefit from the fish and the food that you put in there. It's really a nice balance.
That's the same thing with a coral reef tank. I mean, you know,
same thing.
For the longest time,
it's the ammonia, I'm telling you.
Yes.
That's it.
We have another believer, Sanjay. We've converted him.
So if you look at these,
on him for a long time on this.
You look at these retailers and wholesalers that have these huge tanks filled with like flat, low tanks filled with corals, with very few fish in them. Yeah. Those would benefit from ammonium additions, I'm sure.
Yeah,
right.
Actually, I'm speaking to like 3 aquaculture facilities, and they've all shifted to adding ammonia, and they've all been quite happy with it. Some of them have said that they basically have all their, when they frag a coral, it used to take 2 to 3 weeks to start to see the frag spots gone. They're gone in a week now. And some are now keeping Acropora speciosa that they couldn't keep before, since they started dosing ammonia. So that's anecdotal, but I've probably heard from 150 people that have been dosing it. And I've only heard from like 2 that didn't see anything positive, but they also had high nitrate levels. So it's anecdotal yet. I'm waiting till someone does the study.
Yeah.
Or a more scientific study than what we're doing now. But I'm fairly positive that it does have positive effects under the circumstances that we discussed.
That holds true for like all this stuff with trace elements and all these things. It's all anecdotal.
It's always been anecdotal since we started in the hobby. Charles.
Well, that's right. It's a hobby. But I mean, what really is needed is a controlled, study where they look at reflectance and absorbance of different wavelengths is those colors really increasing or not, and by how much, and what is the mechanism by which this color is improving if it's due to a certain element. Like, if you go to Fauna Marine's knowledge base, they have all the elements there, and they will tell you, based on what they know from the literature, this is the role these things play, but it's still okay, we know that's the role they play, but is that really what's happening when we add this stuff? Are they really, are they making more of it? Or did they not have enough to begin with in terms of the enzymes or the products that they're using these elements
you're talking about serious research money and somebody doing it at a university, with lots of money.
That sounds like Mike.
Huh?
Yeah, I have my own university. I'm going to start that.
I want to thank Wife Price Reefer for the super chat. This is a very unique comment. I'd pay $25 for Julian's bottled pee. So I guess that's a new product, perhaps.
There you go, Julian.
Yeah, call it Julian's juice, right?
Yep, that's it.
Did he said he would or he did?
He would.
He would.
Maybe already did.
I got it.
He already did.
Julian's holding out on us.
I thought he was criticizing his product.
Is carbon
No.
dosing necessary when you're dosing ammonia in most cases?
Not really.
As with everything, it depends. If you have an adequate coral load, probably not, because they're going to absorb it faster. Or if you don't have that many fish in it, you're probably not going to have it. It's a balancing act, as with everything. I mean, the one thing that it does cause you to do is probably more testing, which is probably always better because more information is always better.
Yeah.
Well,
tell
it
you
depends
why
on the
I still
quality of the
dose-
information.
I still carbon dose though. I do it because
Why?
my strategy these days is I want to be able to manually drive down things to 0 and then adjust them by myself. Right?
So which form of carbon are you dosing?
Well, it's vinegar because I'm using it with
Yeah.
kalkwasser.
With
So it's
kalkwasser.
mixed in with kalkwasser.
Yeah, the simple.
But I've noticed that when my ammonia ran out and I was out of town, sitting in Miami happily, came back and the nitrates was at 0 in the tank.
Well, I think, you dosing these things, we really are influencing the bacteria population.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
there's
Sure.
got to be a lag time, that
Yeah.
you kind of grow it and then maybe they might starve when you stop doing it, but they don't stop doing their work instantly.
Right.
Right.
So they go into a,
Well, they also they just decrease in number. You
yeah.
know?
Yeah, they might
So
be
the ones that
reasonable.
are left are still doing the same amount of work.
Right.
There's just fewer of them.
Or this is what we think is going on, at least.
Right.
Well, now maybe with all this
Add that to your list to study, Mike, at your university.
yeah, the
Okay.
bacterial study, we can maybe look at these kinds of things.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Well, that's one of the whole areas that we really need to understand is the bacteria and the microbiome and how everything interacts. Because one of the things we didn't talk about with trace elements, we're adding them, but there's nothing in the literature that says the corals are taking them up. It seems more likely the bacteria are taking them up and then the corals are getting them from the bacteria. So that's another one on my university list of things to test is try to get a better understanding of the bacteria and its relationship to trace elements.
Well, I mean, we know that the zooxanthellae are taking in, nutrients that plants might typically take in.
Right.
But yeah, there really is a scarcity of literature talking about corals uptaking trace elements. Charles, I think there's some soft coral literature, right? I see that.
Yeah, but organics and certain things. But there's also the gut fauna. There's the gut fauna that lives inside the coelentron in the
Yeah.
coral.
Right.
There's also bacteria that live in there,
Yeah.
just like in our guts.
Yeah,
And it will take things and make them bioavailable for the coral.
Mhm.
right. But the coral itself. See, there's so much work for graduate students to do.
Yeah. Sanjay, you're in the wrong damn field for being a PhD. You should have been in this and you'd have 20 TAs instead of just one.
Right.
Yeah. Who's funding this research? I want to know that first.
NOAA.
NOAA, that's it.
Yep.
And even NOAA, they want to fund climate research, They're not.
Well, trace elements have everything to do with the whole climate thing. So
Yeah.
here you go.
Well, the other thing that we have
Yeah,
to
I-
also take into account is, sure, you're adding ammonia now, so now your corals are growing faster, or whatever you're adding, your corals are growing faster. Doesn't that also mean that the demand for everything else will also go up for every trace element and everything else that
Yeah.
you think
Those
is
trace
important?
Calcium and alkalinity at the very least, right?
Yeah, those
Right.
typically, once you start dosing ammonia, you will see your alkalinity and your calcium consumption go up. But we get back into, Charles, you were a chemistry teacher when I first met you. We're back to the limiting factor. What is the limiting factors for the growth? And we don't know which trace elements are going to be those limiting. So that's why they do more ICP testing and say, okay, we're short on nickel or we're short on chromium or whatever, and people add it.
Yep.
Is it doing anything? We don't know.
Well,
But the ICP test shows that it's in shortage and it could be the limiting factor for growth and coloration.
I just want
Yeah.
to thank a few folks just quickly for the super chats. Thirsties Reef, thank you very much. Rob Alexander, I think this is in regard to the Julian P product. At his age, it would take 3 days to get a bottle. And
He'll overnight it.
Rob
is that
upstate.
Terry Siegel?
I don't know. And Rob Upstate New York, thank you, man, for that very generous super chat. Sounds like chapter 3 and volume 4 to me, gents. Yes. More.
Hey, Charles, volume 3.5, right? There we go.
Yeah.
So is this something that that my understanding in terms of ammonia dosing is that you shouldn't be doing this for a new reef tank. This is not something that should be done for somebody that's just coming to the hobby, or somebody that's starting up a new reef tank and is trying to establish the tank and getting the tank stable and all that sort of thing. This is for like a mature reef tank, healthy tank, healthy corals, and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, is the recommendation here on the panel to, for folks that have a healthy, happy, growing, thriving reef tank to start seriously consider ammonia dosing?
No, only if their nitrates are being sucked up so fast that they have to add nitrate. If the tank is happy and balanced, I've learned this the hard way, quit monkeying with it. Follow what Sanjay does and just keep it stable and be happy with it. But over time, things tend to change. So if the corals get so fat and happy that they're sucking out all the nitrogen, that's the point where you start looking at adding ammonia. But you better be prepared for more rapid growth, because one of the things we didn't talk about is, when Sanjay and I talked about it the last time I was over, the most colorful corals are those that are growing the fastest. So is the function of coloration due to us adding trace elements or everything, or is it simply due that we're getting faster growth and faster growing corals are more colorful?
Let me amend the question. Got a happy, healthy, thriving reef tank. Things are doing really well, and you're been dosing nitrate. Okay, should people be considering switching over to ammonia dosing?
If you're already dosing nitrates, yes.
Yeah, ammonia is the preferred form of nitrogen anyway.
Right.
So you'd be choosing the better.
But if you're feeding so much and your nitrates are always high, you don't want to add ammonia. Yes.
Yes.
Right.
That's why I say bring them down. Bring them down first and then add ammonia.
So here's a question that I posted, posited years ago, like 20, 30 years ago, about people that were, I want my corals to grow fast. I'm bumping up my alkalinity, my calcium, and adding more light. They're growing great. But is that natural? And are you, in fact, you're growing these corals so quickly that the skeletal density is about 50% of normal.
Who cares?
So you've got fast growing corals that are super brittle. So this is one of the problems they've looked at in situ in the reefs, where they're dosing with they're purposely adding nitrogen or phosphorus to a reef to see what happens. And one of the predictions is, as the pH and alkalinity go down and nutrient levels go up, the corals are going to grow faster, but they're going to be more brittle. Right. And so the first storm that goes through is going to basically decimate a reef and the shoreline behind it. So here we are growing these corals really quickly, but no one, as far as I know, has looked at the density of the skeleton and compared it to a wild coral.
But we're growing these for our enjoyment. We're not growing them to put them back out on the reef. So that's kind of
I understand that, but you're creating these corals that are much more brittle, more prone to breaking. Is that a healthy coral? That's my question. And then if your goal is to breed them and you want to spawn them, I get the same question. Like, what's a healthy coral?
Sure, what's a healthy coral?
Sure, you can make them spawn, but the spawn quality might be crap.
Sure.
Or you can grow them really quick, but they're fall apart. I used to in Hawaii, we used to take a coral. I could crush a euphyllia in my hand. That's how brittle it was.
Yeah.
But you were a lot stronger when you were younger, Charles, so that doesn't count.
No, it's the opposite, Mike.
Yeah.
I don't know. There are
stronger now.
that I really cannot cut with the pliers even right now, with the cutters. Right? Again, I don't know if how does that compare to the ocean? I don't know. But
what's your alkalinity level?
It's pretty density is still pretty high. It's hard to cut them.
No, what's your alkalinity? Still
9, 10, somewhere in that range.
What's that in real numbers?
In real numbers?
Real numbers. Like molar equivalents or ppm.
Multiply by 3 point whatever you need to multiply with.
Well, you're the professor.
I don't,
Can't do that in your head.
Chemistry.
It's a multiplication problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's all algebra at this point.
Keith
Yeah.
told us there'd be no math tonight.
Yeah.
You lied.
Tougher.
Thanks to Reef Culture Company. Thirsty forgot his question. Laugh out loud. Yep. And Polo1126, thank you so much for that generous super chat. Legends, thanks for this one. Keep you all with your $100 frags. Don't forget to tip your host. Thank you very much, Polo1126.
I want to talk about your second question on your list there about the ratio of nitrate to phosphate of 100 to 1.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
How important is it?
Talk to Mike about it.
Yep.
Yes.
He's the promoter.
So
I'm the promoter of it.
What's
Okay,
what's go ahead, Charles.
Couple of things. Yeah, well, so one of the things that I want to point out for the people watching is that it is not the ratio of nitrates to phosphates. It's the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus. So you can't just take your nitrate number and divide it by your phosphate number. That is not the ratio. You've got to convert it to nitrate nitrogen or phosphate phosphorus and then do the math. But when you look in the scientific literature, and I've been working on this for the last year and a half and reading as many papers as I can on it, they're not looking at that ratio. They're looking, and this is a mass ratio. So this is the ratio of the grams and milligrams. What the research look at are the molar ratios. So I convert all my ratios into molar ratios so I can then compare it to what I'm reading in the scientific literature. So
See,
this ratio,
professor. We're not
no, it's
chemistry
got,
professors.
but this ratio that you have 100 to 1, it's a mass ratio, right? So it's mass. So you cannot compare it to anything you would find in the scientific literature
No.
or be able to understand it.
But
I think that a lot of people get hung up with the Redfield ratio and all that stuff. The Redfield ratio is also a molar ratio of 16 to 1. It's a molar ratio. So you can't take your nitrates and phosphates and try to get 16 to 1. It doesn't work. The math doesn't work that way. The other thing to remember is that the Redfield ratio is based on oceanic phytoplankton. It's not coral.
right.
It's not bacteria. Bacteria's ratio is 10 to 1 of a molar ratio. And cyanobacteria is 5 to 1. In corals, they're finding the ratio is 50 to 1. But there are very few reefs in the world that are that high. Most reefs are like 2 or 3 to 1 in terms of a molar ratio, except for Florida, which is around 35 to 1 because of decades of eutrophication. Yeah. So the question is that the 50 to 1 ratio is the one that's a molar ratio. So to convert that, if you want to, no, wait, that's the other way around. So if you take that number, what is it? You would divide it by 1.53 and that will give you the mass ratio. But anyway, the mass ratio that I would shoot for would be much lower than that. But I know that this is what Claude promotes.
No,
I think
well,
his
actually,
ratio ranges like 90 to 110 or something.
actually, where this came from for me is during COVID, when we had nothing to do and nobody had anything to do, I was communicating with 25 people that I thought had gorgeous reef tanks and getting all their numbers and plugging them in and playing with them and doing everything. And that's where I found, by pure happenstance, that the tanks that had the nicest, most colorful, healthy corals had a ratio of approximately 100 to 1 nitrate to phosphate. I then, 2 years later, after COVID, was discussing this with Claude, who has done 250,000 ICP tests. And he said, and I said, you know what was interesting is, I wasn't looking for this, but what I found is the tanks that had the most colorful corals had a 101 ratio. And that's why I talked about it, because from a hobbyist point of view, a reef tank is not like the ocean. So the ratios on the ocean, while they may be beneficial there, may not necessarily be perfect in a reef tank. So I brought this up to Claude's attention and I said, I found 101 to be the best ratio. And he said, that's curious because that's what I found. So it's purely by pure happenstance that we agreed upon 50 to 1 is a good ratio, but if you get it up to 101 in a tank rather than in the ocean, it seems to be beneficial for the inhabitants of the tank. So that was all I was talking about. And that's from looking at 25 tanks. Again, not a scientific number. If I could have had 100 tanks, which is what I would look at now, it would be interesting to see how well that ratio holds up.
But hang on, so taking into consideration what Charles was just talking about, what was your actual ratio? Were you talking about parts per million to parts per million nitrate to phosphate?
Yes.
Yes, so you need to do that conversion and see what that truly is in a red field.
Right. Well, that's the question, is how relevant is the Redfield ratio in a reef tank versus in the ocean? Again, we've always...
The Redfield ratio is not relevant to anything.
Okay.
It's not relevant to the ocean or your tank.
It's the same as what you
It's
did.
phytoplankton.
Yeah,
I know, but people always tout it. That's what I'm
I
sure
know
it's
people
saying.
tout it. The people are wrong. That's what I'm telling
Not-
you. They're
not
wrong.
Paletto's ratio.
Even this guy that's right there right now, Sanjay, and I watched your talk on YouTube talking about the Redfield ratio. You got it wrong.
I don't talk about Redfield ratios.
No,
Yes, you do. I
Yeah.
have you on video.
Send
Go
me
look
the
at your
doc-
He's got the
Aqua
evidence.
talk.
This will
Yeah.
keep Sanjay.
he was talking about red LEDs. You didn't
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
you gotta hear properly.
The red LED ratio.
Oh my.
No, so that's where I came up with a number for hobbyists from what I found. Again, during COVID, when there was nothing to do but run numbers around and play with your calculator all day, because basically we were all stuck at home. So, and then Claude agreed that was a good ratio in a reef tank. Whether it's relevant or not, I try to stick by that 100-to-1 ratio in my tank. And I seem to have a better, I don't have problematic algae. The corals seem to thrive better and I get better coloration the closer I am to that ratio. When I get phosphate too high, then I seem to run into problems, which has been what we've talked about literally since the beginning of the hobby. If your phosphate levels are skewed too high, Sanjay used to run 90 nitrates and 2 phosphates, and his tank was thriving. I mean, there literally was not a speck of algae in it. So it was a very high ratio.
There's only 45.
That was
Yeah.
It's only 45.
no.
Oh,
His
Then he
ratio is
started
fine.
dosing ammonia.
That's not the problem. The
Then
problem,
Then he
the
started
problem,
dosing
Mike,
ammonia and went
when
nuts.
you have high phosphate, your corals are nitrogen starved. And when you have high nitrogen and low phosphate, your corals are phosphate starved.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have
So-
a balanced ratio. But
No,
is
no,
that ratio 100 to 1,
is not,
50 to
it's not
1?
it's not a balanced ratio. 100 to 1 is not balanced. Balanced ratio is 1 to 1.
No. What I'm saying, I'm not saying balanced from a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm saying balanced in terms of their nutrient needs. They probably need more nitrogen than they need phosphate or phosphorus.
As long as they have phosphate, they're happy. And this is from when I went to France. I went to Monaco. I visited the scientific research center there, not the museum, but there's a scientific research center, and they work on coral nutrition in terms of the nutrient levels and the effects of these nutrient levels on corals. And what the researcher there told me, he says, as long as they have phosphorus, the corals are happy. And if you limit them in phosphorus is when you have problems. And the reason I was talking to her was because I've gone through our data in our tank over the last 16 years, and I can pinpoint 3 episodes where we had massive loss of coral, and every single one of them that our molar ratio was over 200 or 300. And so once they got below that, my tank looked the best. I have photos of the tank. The nitrates were like 30, and the phosphate was 1.7. And that's when the corals looked really, really good. And as soon as we said, oh my God, the phosphate's too high, we got to get the phosphate down, that's when we started having all kinds of problems. As soon as we let the phosphate climb back up, everything was fine. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to get my nitrogen down so that I can lower my phosphate, because I don't want to run with that high of a phosphate, because there are other issues when you run at high phosphate like that, because you have so much zooxanthellae now with so much nutrition. There's such a high demand for carbon, inorganic carbon. They're robbing the calcification process for carbon, and that's from the alkalinity. So that's why you end up with more brittle corals too. So you have to boost your alkalinity. It's something that Marlon Atkinson found back when working on the biosphere. Same thing. You remember he was back in the 90s, he was saying, how are these hobbyists growing these corals in these high nutrient levels? It's because the alkalinity was higher than normal and allowed to compensate for that.
That was Albert
So-
Thiel's fault, right?
What?
Albert Thiel at that
What about
time.
him?
He was telling people to run 10 to 15 DKH back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because your nutrient levels were much higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one, the testing was much more inaccurate than it is now, and we typically didn't know how to bring the nutrient. We didn't have GFO or other means for bringing it down, and
Yeah.
two, typically fed the tank way too much.
Yeah.
So there's another public aquarium in Georgia that's a very nice coral tank, and I have their data for the last 4 years, and their nitrate and phosphate levels were pretty low, but they were a very nice ratio. They were around 50, but they added a lot more fish, and so now the nitrogen and phosphorus have gone up, and you can see that both lines are going up in tandem. So the ratio is still nice around 50. So everything looks good, and everything's growing fine.
No, you're agreeing with me. I said 50 is a good number, but I found that 100
No,
is better,
that's
but 50 is
no,
good.
no. 50 is
Yes,
a
that's
molar
what I said.
ratio.
That's
It's
a
a
molar.
molar. I'm talking a molar ratio.
You're talking a
Mike.
molar ratio. Now, how many hobbyists are going to be able to run the math to do the molar ratio?
I'm just telling you.
Okay.
Don't equate your ratio to my ratio.
No, I'm not.
His ratio is
I
better
think
than your
that's-
ratio.
Okay, and if I have a mass ratio of 60, that's nitrogen to phosphorus. It's not nitrate to phosphate.
Right.
So if you do the
Charles?
math, I think that comes out to close to your value.
Right. You need to create a conversion chart showing, parts per million to parts per million. How does that compare to moles to moles?
Who
Well,
does all
Keith
that?
has sharing turned off, or I would show you my spreadsheet that I have that does exactly that.
You might be
Yes,
able to
well,
share it, Charles. You might be able to share it, but
I tried. It says it's turned off by
Oh.
the moderator.
really, okay.
That's your fault, Keith.
Yep.
Let me see here.
I'm
What
still
can
trying to
I,
figure out how
The
I can
host
spell.
isn't allowing multiple presenters sharing for this meeting. So just turn my share on, nobody else's.
I am so unfamiliar with Zoom. I'm let's see here.
Don't worry about
Under
it. It's
security, share screen, enable.
Yeah, just enable share screen.
Enable.
Share screen. Don't ask me though. I'm not Mr. Technology.
Enable waiting
Yep,
room. I don't
enable
share.
share
Well, I'm not going to
screen.
share my screen.
No, but you can just let Charles share it. Just enable it for everyone, and Charles can share. That doesn't matter. Just enable share.
And how do I do that? I do that. Go into.
There's a little sharing button at the bottom. Or maybe it's on top in yours. I don't know, but there's a share button. Green button with an arrow.
I don't see it. Oh, share screen. Okay. Duh.
Right there.
So now, share.
Just hit share screen. That's it.
It's going to
And
share
then
my
pick-
screen though.
No, pick all other participants or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I don't see that. Or is it advanced there? Or share
I
slides?
can't do it now because it's disabled, but you should be able to
Basic.
share it for all participants.
All right, let me look.
Oh,
at,
never mind. Let's move on to another topic.
Yeah.
Another topic.
I already won this
Turns out how to
argument.
share my screen here. Okay, close that out. I want to close the Zoom out call out here.
No, don't close this out yet.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Another time.
All right.
There we are.
So I want to be conscientious of everybody's time. There were a lot of topics on this list. Is there any other topics on this list that anybody is interested in covering, or else I'll just pick one?
Yeah.
Yeah, pick one.
All right.
An interesting one.
How about the use
ICP
of
testing.
How about the use of chemicals to solve algae issues, like cyano? Is that a good thing? Can people, is it fine to use like ChemiClean to get rid of cyano? Is it okay to use what's that thing you use to get rid of bryopsis? Fluconazole for bryopsis. Let's talk about that sort of thing. Is that something? I mean, my personal experience, at one point recently, I used fluconazole to get rid of some bryopsis in one of my tanks, and it triggered a diatom outbreak, and the bryopsis eventually did come back, a few months later. So, are we kind of playing with stuff there in terms of triggering one thing to solve, one certain issue? It's kind of like this domino effect in a reef aquarium. It's a complicated thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for cyanobacteria. I mean, I use it once in a while. I mean, I try to use it as infrequently as possible, but there are times when the cyanobacteria bloom is so thick that it's not going to go away on its own. Right?
I think
Small
once you've
patches,
exhausted all avenues,
yeah, small patches, I don't worry about because they come and go, right? But when it sometimes gets out of hand, at that time I'll do it. And there's enough evidence to show that eventually your bacterial composition just comes back to what it was.
Do you dose a lot of bacteria when you're doing that to kind of try to? No.
I never dose bacteria. I mean, there's so much bacteria in the reef tank to begin with.
But you've never done
Loaded with bacteria.
you've never done an aquabiome test to see what your ratios or anything like that either.
I did one long time ago when I was having issues. But I know Eli has done these tests where with erythromycin or whatever they use for chemiclean, right? That sure, it does impact it right away, but it comes back.
Well, that leads me to a second question. Have you guys seen more of an issue with cyano and other issues in the spring when the pollen counts get real high? Because I've been following my pollen levels here, and I have more issues when the pollen levels goes off the scale than like in the winter or dry summer. But whenever pollen levels suddenly skyrocket, I've had issues in my tanks. Have you guys seen the same thing? And I've also had a bunch of people tell me the same thing.
There's plenty of online forums with that very topic. So obviously you're not alone. But I don't know. We don't have as strong a pollen season in South Florida as you do up north.
I mean, I think it's just springtime. Everything wants to bloom. It's nature.
Putting the cyano
Programmed to bloom.
Bryopsis.
Everything. It's summertime. It's coming. The springtime. Let's bloom.
Hey, look at Charles's reef tank right there.
Yeah.
Charles, by the way, I think I've enabled sharing for everybody. So if you want to, looks like you're sharing right now a video of one of your big display tanks.
That's the tank in Charles's bedroom.
Yeah.
Right. There you go.
I think he's got his
sleeps
sound
with
off.
the fishies.
Yeah. Big fish.
I don't know if you're trying to talk, Charles. We can't hear you.
That was a big fish.
no, I'm not talking. Now I'm
okay.
talking.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard me, but I believe I have enabled sharing among the participants. If you need to,
Okay.
wanted to try to do that.
Yeah. So this is live. So I'm at work.
Greg Carroll is in the house. Greg's got a question for the panel. Then we can get back to the prior question. Would love to hear thoughts on recent push of biome testing. Is it worth it?
I think
it's too early to say.
Yeah, I think we're still in its infancy, and you get the results back like 3 weeks, a month later. By then, your whole biome could have changed, depending on what your manipulations you're making while you're doing the test, because you're usually sending it in because you have a problem. So you start trying to manipulate things. So how much is it relevant once you've had it in? I think it's worthwhile as a baseline to give you an idea. Like whenever I had issues, I had an extremely high level of Vibrio, and then I had an extremely high level of Arcobacter. So from that standpoint, I did find out what the pathogens were, but I've sent in a couple other tests and they didn't really show any kind of change or anything that was actionable. Because that's going to be the next thing. How much of what you get is actionable, and then what are you going to do to manipulate it? Mm-hmm. And is that going to be beneficial, or is you going to cause more problems, since we know so little about the microbiome?
Good point. Did we answer his question? Any Greg?
Julian, what are your thoughts on that microbiome testing?
Well, I'm glad that people are starting to do this. I do agree that I think it's in its infancy. And I mean, you had the commercial company doing that initially. You have Salem Clemens now looking at microbiology in aquariums. It's basically a black box that we really know very little about at the moment. But the more people seriously investigate it, the more we'll be illuminated. We'll be able to understand it better. And it's not a simple subject where you say, aha, okay, yes, now here's the answer. It's going to be many years of discovery.
And you still won't have the answers.
Well, no, we won't, but we may learn some little branches, some practical application. I'm hopeful for, and I'm delighted that there are people looking at it, young people, enthusiastic people who are sharing and writing. That's what needs to be happening. I would only caution that, we have to, take the information at face value, that, it's not just because you have a publication and it's saying this is happening, that doesn't mean, aha, okay, that's how I control my hair algae. It's part of the picture, not the whole picture. Yeah.
So now instead of selling Julian juice, he can sell other Julian products,
Yeah.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
So bacteria off you, Julian. That's the
Right.
next.
Yep, that's it. We're going to be taking scrapings.
Right.
On that subject, I still to this day, it completely baffles me. Mike Paletta came to visit me one time, and I'm giving him frags, and I say, hey, Mike, why don't you get a piece of this beautiful green hydnophora? It was a branchy one that I got from a shop in Chicago. It was being farmed in Chicago, and it grew like a weed. I mean, it was just unbelievable how fast this beautiful fluorescent green hydnophora had grown for years for me. And Mike says, no, it always dies. Don't even bother. I don't want to take any. I kill it. And I swear to God, within days after his visit, it died in that aquarium. Every other aquarium I had after I'd been growing it for years. So there may be something to this, personal.
I don't want to tell you, I did pee in your tank, Julian, just to do that.
That's it. Now I know. Yeah, I mean, honestly, to this day, I'm totally baffled by that. Did you embarrass the coral? I mean, was it just, that, or was there some biological effect of your presence?
Well, I can take it a step further. Since then, the voodoo curse was lifted off of me. I now have 3 different hydnophoras. I hadn't been able to grow them for 10 years. They're all thriving in different tanks.
Excellent.
I have no idea.
Well, maybe now they'll die, because then that's the other aspect that maybe, aside from microbiology, there may be a metaphysical connection to our aquariums. So it could be that simply by paying attention to something, we influence its health. Not by any manipulation of the water parameters or anything, just physically looking at it, you may be doing something.
Yeah, that's why your most expensive coral dies first.
Yeah,
That's the one you're looking at the most.
What you're looking at. The same thing with giant clams. So, yeah.
Well, the same thing with, I used to count the number of fish in my tank, and as soon as I would count the number of fish, they would always diminish by 1 or 2. It didn't matter if I had them for 2 years or 10 years. Never count the fish, because they will die. I can guarantee you that. So I never count them. How many fish do you have? Oh, 62. Well, today I have 59. That's how it happens. So I don't ever count the fish. I have no idea how many fish I have in any tank. I don't count them.
Good. That's why, people always ask you that question. A novice, how many fish you have? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Do you name them? No, I don't name them.
Don't name them. Do not name them.
Do not name them. Yeah, if you learn nothing else tonight, do not name your fish.
But name your corals. They'll be more valuable.
So I wanted to read Greg's follow-up comment. He said he got criticized for saying it's not actionable at this point. He's talking about the microbiome data, but they are saying buy my reef rubble to fix your tank. So the question is this stuff actionable though? Julian, there was recently a published paper in Coral Magazine with the protocol for oxalinic acid, right? An in-tank treatment, a dip, as well as full in-tank treatment. What are your thoughts on Greg's comments?
it is actionable, right? By this rock. I mean, it's coming with all this bacteria that's missing from your tank.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's actionable, right?
Well, I
Yeah.
guess what I'm saying in terms of being actionable, let's say you've got a microbiome report. It says you've got pathogens in there. Then you do a full in-tank treatment using like oxalic acid, and the RTN, STN episodes go away.
Well, they might have gone away anyway.
It might have gone away anyway.
Yeah, well, what you're saying
Nobody
though is
wants to
once
do
you've wiped
that
them out
piece.
with the oxalic acid, should you add a good live bacterial culture to repopulate the tank? And in that case, would all agree probably yes. If you can get good live rock, good live rock is still one of the best things you can put in a tank.
The question right now also is, what is good bacteria in a reef tank?
Yeah, and
Right,
good
and that,
bacteria,
sure,
good
you know,
bacteria can go rogue and go bad. So
Yeah. I mean, you read the article that Salem Clements wrote that you could have Vibrio that's good and it suddenly turns it into bad, or this bacteria is good, something else turns it pathogenic.
That's
We
scary.
don't know. That's the whole point. We don't know, and we're in the infancy of understanding bacteria, microbiome, coral diseases. I mean, even the scientific literature is pretty much still in its infancy. I mean, they're putting a paste with amoxicillin around the rims of corals. I mean, you know, seriously, there's probably going to come up with something better down the line. But you're basically at Fred Flintstone management of a lot of things in his hobby still. Despite how much better we've gotten and how much success we now have, we're still in the infancy in a lot of things, understanding coral nutrition, coral diseases, coral pathogens. I mean, and every week you find a new coral pest, and then you have to try to find a way to eradicate the pest. So there's still a lot more going on that we don't know about than we do know about.
yes,
you know, look at the humans, right? We don't know enough about the human diseases. And we've been doing research on these forever. We spend so much money on all of this.
there is a lot more money going toward this.
Right? So why do you think we're going to solve the coral problem?
Well, there has, you know, in the past 5 to 10 years, been a lot more money going toward research on coral disease because the diseases have become more prevalent, especially in the Caribbean. So the fact is there are biologists looking at both antibiotic and probiotic protocols, treatments, whether it's for corals being maintained in aquariums or corals out on the reef. It's being done in a scientific way, and that's the literature that we do need to be paying attention to.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Is it a waste of time for a hobbyist to dip all incoming corals in a antibiotic bath?
That's a scary question. I can say that from my experience with the elegance corals, I think that the types of elegance that come in, the deeper water one with the horseshoe shape, I think that they all should be treated, not just dipped, but actually treated with oxalic acid. And I know that Chris at ACI does that. I mean, and the result of that is staggering, because if you don't do it, they get that condition and they die. If you do, most of them will survive. And that's a, you know, it's clear that that's a protocol that should be taken. Same
thing with a lot of tridacna clams. We all have had clams. You have them for years. Something goes wrong, they all die, or you stupidly add a new one without doing anything to it, and it wipes out all the other ones in a week. We've all done that.
Yeah, we have. And, you know, with the clams, there's multiple pathogens that can be causing it. Of course, with corals, there's multiple pathogens. But, you know, with the elegance, we know that that was sort of one thing, and it was susceptible to the oxalic acid treatment. And that's just a wonderful discovery. There is also the strain of elegance coral that is immune to that problem, and they do not need to be treated. They don't get the condition. It's the most common one, not deep water variety. They don't have a horseshoe-shaped skeleton. They just grow a nice meandering-shaped skeleton, purple tips, green striped mantle. You know the one I'm talking about.
John Burleson's.
No, Burleson's was different.
I've never seen one that spectacular since.
Yeah.
40 years.
His was not a horseshoe-shaped one. His was meandering, meandroid, more like the one that's resistant, but his was a pink tip one with a green
Green and blue body.
Yeah, and there is a strain that is being cultivated. A few farmers have it. I forget what they call it, but it's probably the same one John had. And it is hardy, you know, it doesn't have that issue. So yeah, I would love to see the mariculture farms focus on the hardy strains and get more color varieties of them, and you know, get it into mariculture. That would be. But to your question, just prophylactically dipping in antibiotics, I don't know. I think that could lead to more problems, with the exceptions of corals where we know they're going to die if you don't do it. So, you know,
But I think dipping for pests may still be a
Yeah,
very
dipping for pests.
yeah, that's key. You know, obviously I make a product for that purpose. It
You
does.
do?
Yes, it does help. So, and whether you use mine or somebody else's or a combination of them, I think it's beneficial to try to eliminate a lot of these pests.
Are there things that we can do as hobbyists to make our corals more resistant to pathogens, to pests, you know, outside of dips and antibiotics? Are there things, certain parameters that we should be paying more attention to, certain trace elements that we should be paying more attention to make our corals stronger and more resistant to these, you know?
stress.
What's that?
Minimize stress. Stress
Yeah,
causes a lot of
keep them stable.
problems, right?
One of the things,
Minimizing stress and maybe, you know, helping the coral, increasing the adaptability of the coral to different ranges.
they do adapt. Feeding them, of course, the more food you give them, the stronger they are. But I will say that my trip to Sulawesi opened my eyes to something that I was not aware of. I mean, sure, I've been diving for, you know, many years, and I've experienced thermoclines periodically in different places in the tropics, but it became very apparent to me that there is a special zone in Indonesia, in deep water, where quite a few of the LPS corals are collected, where they are exposed normally all the time to much colder water than at the surface. So, you know, I mean, this really supported what Charles and I said so many years ago, that keeping your aquarium in the mid-70s is a good idea. And we could see that in the health of our corals. Well, for certain corals, I would say that it's critical. And that would be some of those deep water Trachophilia, you know, the brightly colorful open brain corals, and of course the Acanthophilia, the big donut corals. They're coming from this, you know, 80, 90 foot depth, and the water temperature there is like 73, 74. It's not 84. It's really chilly down there, and it's that way most of the time. So for them to adapt to our higher temperatures may be a stretch, and it's something to consider. Oh, Charles is showing the NPS tank with the feather duster worm. It's a beautiful tank there at the Steinhardt, and it's got the peppermint angel. See it?
Let me see if I could.
I don't see the angel yet, but
I don't see the angel. I see
oh,
the
there it was. There it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there it is. Yep.
There it is. There it is.
Oh wow, the peppermint angel.
Nice. Nice.
Wow. Charles, start speaking, and I can make you the speaker view and blow up that shot.
Yeah, look at that.
How long have you had that fish?
5 years.
All right,
Nice.
we've blown it up now for everybody to. Oh, now we got me blown up here.
What's the temperature in that tank?
73.
Wow.
Oh wow.
It's on the high end for that fish, and he's doing great.
Not really. That's what it is. That's
And
where it was collected.
Wow, 73 there. Whereas, like I was just talking about
Tahiti.
Sulawesi, But in Sulawesi, Indonesia, at only 80 feet, it's 73 degrees.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the season. Like, remember in Vanuatu in the summer, like at night, it gets into the high 60s, and that they used to be able to collect chambered nautilus in like 30 feet of water.
Yeah. So
Yeah, she's kind of shy. So we
crazy.
had a pair of these.
Yeah.
We lost the male a couple of years ago, but we had the juveniles. We had the larvae up to 40 days, so we were very close.
Super close.
Ooh.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Such a beautiful fish.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Charles.
yeah, my pleasure. Come and see it in person, Michael.
I don't travel as much as I used to, Charles.
Somebody said that we had glossed over Mike Richardson. We kind of glossed over the question that I had about fluconazole and whether that's a good or bad thing to dose to a reef tank. What do you quick thoughts in terms of using fluconazole on a reef tank? Any collateral damage potentially?
Again, if you're at your wit's end and can't get rid of Bryopsis, there's pretty much nothing that will eat it that I know of. It comes down to a last resort, because it'll start to overgrow everything. It kills it very well, but the problem is it tends to come back if you haven't figured out what the source is that's inducing it to grow in the first place. So it may change. Having worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 40 years, one of the things I will say is there are no perfect drugs. There's side effects for everything that you use. And the same thing with anything you dose a tank. There's always going to be some kind of side effect. You just have to be prepared for it and do your homework before you dose it and try to figure out what caused it to happen. Is some ratio off? Do you have too high of this or that? Something's causing the Bryopsis, because it doesn't just tend to take off for well, it does seem to take off for no reason, but you have to try to do your detective work and figure out what exactly is causing it.
I mean,
Here's an interesting thing about algae, right, growing in the tank. I've noticed with a lot of tanks, when you put an algae scrubber in there, the algae doesn't grow in the tank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That always puzzles me, right? That why would it would grow there but not grow in your tank?
Well, there's times I've seen it grow in a tank.
Yeah. Depends on the nutrient levels, of course. But there's
And the herbivores.
Here's an experiment to help you see that in a different way. If you have one aquarium and it's got algae, and you then connect that one aquarium to another aquarium that is identical, okay?
Yep.
But put more light over that other aquarium, the algae is going to go there. So your display will be algae free, and the other aquarium that has more light is going to have the algae. That's what happens, and I think that's part of what's going on with an algal filter. The algae will grow where the illumination is brighter. It's an observation you can make. They're able to uptake their nutrients better when they have
More light.
more light. There's a top view.
oh,
Charles.
what are we looking at now, Charles?
It's like the water's moving.
Seeing his lights.
Can I make this so?
You can watch him drop his laptop in.
Yeah.
That's right. It's only 5:30 out there.
Yeah, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So, is there anything else that that you guys wanted to bring up that I had on my list, or anything off the top of your head that is gnawing at you?
What was your other list, or what about your viewers? Are they throwing questions at you?
Yeah, let's answer their questions.
All right, folks. Like, I saw Amanda Meckley had a question earlier in the stream, and folks, you could drop some more questions in the chat. But I think Amanda's question, if I can recall, if Amanda's still watching, remind me. But anything? Let's see here. Anything new in the hobby that you guys think is something to pay attention to? I think that's the gist of her question.
Pay attention.
Any new trends that potentially are popping up in the hobby that
Well, we talked about bolus.
Yeah,
We,
we talked
we
about
didn't really
ammonia.
we didn't talk about bolus in depth, but we did refer to the bolus method, but we could save that for another time.
Another time. I hear there's this couple that had acanthophilia spawn, and they're raising them up now.
You're talking about the
That's
mechanism.
Yes. Yeah, giving them a hard time. I'm excited about that. That's new. Well, everybody always wants something new. What about old? Right? Mike, talk about, I remember Lemkemeyer. What about his
Oh,
book?
Jürgen Lemkemeyer, the guy that did the book that I translated and gave to you and John and Charles. Yeah, that was 40 years ago.
See?
Yeah.
Nobody remembers that.
No,
What's old is new again.
Yeah, he wrote the Modern Marine Aquarium in 1982. My father got it for me when he was in Germany. He didn't understand German, but he saw they were keeping corals in their tanks. He brought it home. It took me 2 years to translate it. My aunt then transcribed it and typed it. I photocopied it and gave copies to everybody. And that was the original basis of a lot of stuff. I mean, it had an oxygen reactor that John Burleson built. Remember that?
Yeah.
It had a variety of a power trickle filter. It had protein skimmers. What else did it have? And it talked about live rock in depth. So, I mean, it was way ahead of its time, but no one ever knows or remembers this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Li Cheneng, God bless his soul, was dead in the 60s, but we all still remember him. But this guy actually wrote something in the 80s and showed pictures of live corals, and no one remembers the guy.
Yeah. Go figure.
Yeah.
Because he was technology.
And
freak.
where is he now?
I corresponded with him for about 3 or 4 years, and then he vanished. So he may still be alive, he may not. I've looked for him on Facebook and on.
Mike keeps him in the closet.
All right, Amanda's corrected me. Her question is actually anything new and exciting we may not have heard about. Anything new and exciting we may not have heard about in the hobby.
The same question.
Variation.
It's a variation of what I asked, so
that illusion that we're always on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we heard about Julian's new product today, so
Yeah.
you heard it here first.
The problem is he's going to have difficulty mass producing out without becoming a true alcoholic.
It gives a whole new meaning to the term liquid gold.
Oh, the old liquid gold. Good one, Charles.
that's a good one.
I think I'm going to call it ICP.
Wow, there you go. That's going to be copyrighted.
Wow.
Now,
That's a good
maybe.
There you go.
Christopher Catherman, what keeps you interested in the hobby? What keeps you interested in the hobby?
Learning new things, because there's always something new. We've already talked about all the things that are in their infancy. Our goal is to live long enough so we see them get to their geriatric stage, but I doubt we'll see all these things reach geriatric level, particularly disease, nutrition, maybe pests, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Julian.
There's always new corals and new fish. Honestly, whether you go on diving on a reef or just go to a wholesaler, new anemones, that's always, and new algae, interesting to me to see that. And I really get a thrill also seeing the enthusiasm of other hobbyists and how they come up with new ideas, whether it's a mechanical invention or an idea about the biology of our aquariums. That inspires me. I find it something that motivates me to stay involved. I personally always find things new in my aquariums. I may not have the time to share it as much as I'd like to, as I did when I was earlier in the hobby. When people come and visit me, I might point out and say, look at this something that's happening. It's truly never ending, as you all know. There's something going on new that you've never seen before, even if it's a pest.
Right. A lot of times it's a pest.
Yes.
This is what keeps me going. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So that's a video I had shot for. We have a drone in house, so
Wow.
we had a guy fly a drone over the tank.
Looked like a lot of frags.
Yeah.
The big corals.
All very brittle.
Pump up your alkalinity. It won't have a problem.
Alkalinity's in scientific units, you know.
Yeah. Go ahead. What is it?
Oh, 3.2.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're getting questions here about what everybody keeps their temperature at in their tanks.
Oh, good. Who's going to start?
It depends. When?
Yeah, in the winter,
Right now my tank's running at about 80 degrees.
Yeah.
In
the winter I run it
they'll run
warmer.
about 75 degrees.
Yeah,
For
the
me-
winter I run it warmer because if there's power outage, it won't go bad by getting cold too fast. And in the summer I run it cooler so that if the power goes out, it doesn't get overheated too fast.
I mean, I don't have a chiller, so it does what it does.
Yeah. So I have many aquariums and they're not all at the same temperature. The biggest aquarium at home runs between about 78 to 82. But it's controlled by air conditioning. So no chiller there. But aquariums at my office run more like 74 degrees. Pretty much year round. Also because of air conditioning.
Right, but there's enough scientific evidence that shows that corals grow faster at higher temperatures.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
What was that, Charles?
Hang on.
Are we going to get to see the Debelius photos or what?
You wish.
Wow.
Yeah. That you could see that the giant octopus about to reach down with its suction.
Yeah. Pluck Charles right out of the deep.
Right out of there. Yeah. Look
Yeah,
at
so this was in April. So this tank we keep at 78 degrees.
Yeah.
And then our deep sea, like our Twilight Zone exhibits, are usually like 72. When we were diving in the Philippines, they said the temperature there was, even at 400 feet, was like 78, 76.
Wow.
So it's all seasonal. I mean,
Yeah.
and it depends on upwellings and downwellings and that kind of stuff. So, but one thing we don't do is we don't vary the temperature. So, except for in our coral spawning lab, then that tank can get up to 80, 82, and then it goes down to about 74. We found that we had a lot of RTN issues if we kept the temperatures too high.
Are those
yeah, so
Chris is ACI is commenting. Look at all those 1,000 watt metal halides. Is that what you got going over there, Charles? Metal halide lighting?
Yeah, there's 76,000 watts of metal halide. So some of them have been changed out. They're not all running at 1,000 watts. I would say maybe 8 to 10 of those are at 1,000. The rest are at 750, or there's a few at 600 because we have electronic valves, so we can dial them back. But we are working with Kessel lighting, and so we do have some Kessel lamps that we have on there.
What's the electricity bill every month?
No idea. Can't separate that out from the rest of the building. That's the problem.
He's not paying it.
Was that
I don't care.
That wasn't part of the budget cuts, I hope.
No. Plus, we get a very, very favorable electrical rate. So it's like less than 5 cents a kilowatt hour.
Here's a great question from Todd at Champion Lighting and Supply. How did all four of them meet each other? How did you guys meet?
Oh, good. Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Have we met?
Yeah.
I've never met Keith.
Yeah.
In person. Yeah.
Julian's my mango supplier. That's how I met him.
I met Julian.
We met through the hobby. We all met through the hobby, literally.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
I met Julian when I went to we had invited when I was in Toronto, we had the Marine Aquarium Society of Toronto, which still exists, and we had invited John Burleson to come and speak. I think it was in 1987, 88, somewhere around there. And he came up and spoke. And the following year, we wanted him to come back, and he said, "Oh, I haven't got time to go, but I got this new young guy working for me, and I'm going to send him." So I said, "Well, he can stay with me because I've got room at my house." So I went to the airport, and I met this guy. Got off the plane, and he had hair down to his waist and spiked hair on top, and that was Julian. And so he stayed with me, and we became fast and good friends from decades now.
Yeah.
And Mike, I met when we came down.
Yeah, no, Marine Aquarium. That was the first time I spoke was in '86 for Mast, and I stayed at your house.
That's right.
And then the next year you had me and Scott Michael stay at your house, and we slept on the couch, and Scott kept me up all night laughing because he's out of his mind, and we laughed the entire night. We were like hung over the next day, and you were going, "Will you guys drink?" And I'm going, "No." Scott would not let me stop. He would not stop talking at night. Wow. And then I met Julian at Macna 1 or 2 or 3 or one of them, and then we became friends. And Sanjay came visit me when I lived in Greensburg, which is an hour away from here and an hour closer to him. I'd written an article, and he came in. This is before he even had children. So it's how long I've been friends with him.
Yeah. And now he's got grandchildren.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's, you know, somebody asked the question, what keeps you going in the hobby? This is part of it.
Yeah.
Right. The friends that you've made over the years in the hobby.
Yeah.
That keep you going.
Yeah.
Right? Every time I'm bored with the hobby, you know, I'll end up talking to Mike or Julian, get re-excited about something or the other.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, because the friends we've developed.
That's really been the best part of the hobby for me, other than the aquarium itself, right? It's meeting all these people and becoming friends with all these people for years and years.
And having fun with all these people. I mean, we can't tell you how many laughs we've all had together. I mean, it's hard to find people that you can laugh with and have a sense of humor and don't take anything very seriously. And the group of us have been doing this long enough that we don't take each other that seriously, and we actually enjoy each other's company. And like Charles said, these have all been friends of mine for 30 years and hopefully for 30 more. And nothing changes. I don't see them for 6 months or 6 years. Nothing changes. When we see each other, it's like, oh, everything's still good.
Because that's kind of how it all started, right? Back in those days, you went to a club to give a talk. You ended up staying at somebody's house.
Yeah.
Right.
Clubs didn't have much money.
That was
right.
That was the best part.
Yeah, that was the best part. Most of the time.
Usually a stranger who you had no idea that'd pick you up at the airport and they'd have a sign or they'd be wearing a fish shirt. That was the only way you knew who they were. They could have been a serial killer, picked you up and dumped you by the side of the road. You would have no one would have ever known.
Well, Joe Yolo stayed in the house of a serial killer.
Yeah, he does.
So this is our temperate reef tank.
You'd sleep on their couch. You'd sleep on the floor. Because that was the fun part of it. And then you come home with a big bag full of frags, and you were like, "Wow, this is great."
Yeah, well, I didn't because I lived in Canada and I couldn't take anything back.
No, we still got you a lot of free stuff, Charles. Scott Michael, a lot of free stuff.
Yeah, like the rare white leather coral.
Yeah, the red clam.
The red clam, Mike. Yeah. I still have to show you the red clam. It's in here. It's in this tank. This is our temperate reef. This is what it looks like off Deepwater, California, about 100 feet down.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Charlie, thank you so much for that super chat. Go ahead, Charles.
No, go ahead.
Now, well, listen, guys, this has been a real treat for me and for everybody out there that's been watching the live stream. I think this is a great way to kind of recalibrate and just think about stuff more, just kind of like the basics and try not to, I think, get too into the weeds of things. At least that's kind of like what I'm getting out of this discussion is that I've always tried to like lean on observation and not get too crazy with the complexity of the hobby. And I think there is definitely many ways to kind of dive deep into this stuff, and there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of areas to explore. But I think when it all comes down to it, it's kind of like getting back to the basics.
Well, getting back to the basics and having fun with the hobby, like we talked about in the first topic, enjoy the hobby. It's a hobby. Have fun with it. Have fun meeting the people. Have fun going to stuff and hanging out with the people. But don't get, I mean, the one thing we also all know is when your tank's bad, life's kind of bad. I mean, it's sad to say that, but when your tank sucks, it's like, then everybody feels that way. Anyone I've ever talked to that's serious about this all feels the same way. If something's dying, you have no idea why, you tend to be down. So talk to people, share your experience, and oftentimes you come to an answer by talking to other people rather than by doing a test or something. Hey, did you look at this? Hey, check out that. I mean, it's usually something simple or something stupid, like Sanjay said, that we did that causes a lot of our own problems. But one of the ways to resolve that is by talking with your friends about it.
Yeah.
The relationships are key. So key.
Yep.
And conversely, I mean, you see online a whole lot of people trashing each other, which it seems to be a fairly recent trend. There was a little bit of flaming on CompuServe years ago, but I see
nothing like this.
Nothing like lately, and I think that's really counter to what we were just talking about. It detracts from the joy people have in sharing their love of the hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have fun with it, right? I mean, that's what this is all about, having fun.
It's a hobby. If it's your job, that's why Sanjay and I never did it as a full-time business or even as business in any way, because we have fun with it. I mean, how many countless road trips we've taken, we always laugh half the time about all the craziness that's going on.
Well, the hobby isn't my business.
I mean, that's the fun. We still enjoy doing those.
Yeah.
Well, the hobby isn't my business, but it's what I've done as a profession now for almost 30 years. But I don't remember the last time I saw you, Mike.
Probably 25 years ago.
Probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Well,
maybe longer than that. At least 29 years ago, because you never met my daughter and she's now 28. So at least 28 years ago.
No, I just remember your sons, Tony and Mike. Yeah.
Yep.
Cleaning our clock, playing the memory game on your carpet.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they were 3 and 4. They were sharper than us at playing concentration.
Yeah, it was insane. It was the memory game with the 2 matching cards.
Oh, I know. What's the memory game? It's like concentration.
Flip one over. Like, how'd you get that? You never even flipped them over before, and you got a match. Like it was strange. I remember Mike telling me that Mike Jr. knew more about corals than most of the guys in the pet stores that he went to, that he bought corals from.
Yep.
And he was 5 at the time.
No, we used to play that memory game with 100 cards, and they would clean my clock. It was the first one to 50. I'd have 2. They'd have 50. That's how good they were. It was scary.
It was supernatural.
Yeah.
Well, I think on that we're gonna wrap it up, guys. I just thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your stories, your knowledge, your insights. It has been a really incredible and entertaining and taking a lot of information in. So thank you. I also want to thank the sponsors one more time. Polo Reef. Make sure to check out Polo Reef's new YouTube video that drops this Friday. The 900-gallon drop down has been a long time coming, and after the first one arrived, cracked, it's finally in place. Oof, that's bad. And progress that is made in a short time is unreal. Watch as aquascaping lighting and corals go in. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Polo Reef for video drop notifications. Champion Lighting and Supply, besides being a place for hobbyists to purchase saltwater aquarium supplies online, Champion Lighting is also a wholesale distributor for many popular brands. If you own an aquarium store or an aquarium service company, contact Champion Lighting through the website at championlighting.com to set up a wholesale account. Todd and his crew will be at Restock Chattanooga on August 24th and 25th this weekend, so stop by and say hello. Any of you guys going to Reef Stock in Chattanooga this weekend?
I'll be there.
Sanjay's going to be there. All right. And finally, Polyp Lab is another supporter of this live stream. They do their part by being ecologically responsible, using less plastic and more recyclable material. Reefroids is backed by science and uses 100% ocean-sourced ingredients. No filler, no OGM, no gimmick. Polyp Lab, straight results. The best choice for your marine collection. See the reefroids difference for yourself. I want to give a big thank you out to Paul, who is the moderator, as well as Greg Carroll, who I saw in the chat. Please, both of those guys are presidents of their reefer societies, so please join and support your local reefing clubs. They are so important to this hobby. That's another big thing.
Yep.
People should join clubs. And
Yep.
When's the last time you guys spoke at a club? I can't remember the last time I spoke at, I think, the Bay Area Reefers Club I spoke at many years ago.
Spoken at a club. I did speak at the DC club last year, which was after a very long time.
I do
Yeah, John
Zoom
Capolino
calls.
asked me to come for that as well. I haven't been able to come out yet.
That's a good
Yeah.
club. I enjoy going there.
clubs are
The
awesome.
Miami club used to be active, but it's kind of
Yeah.
on a
Miami's
low right now.
needing a push.
Yeah. But
So what's
yeah.
the latest on Magna? Do we know?
Magna? Yes,
Is it-
it's next weekend.
Good, good. Yeah, well, that's right. I'm speaking there. I forgot.
Yeah, you should book your ticket.
Start driving now.
maybe next year.
We shall.
So listen, the last thing I want to say is my next Rappin With ReefBum live stream will be next Tuesday, August 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My guest will be Dr. Alex J. Hall, who is an aquatic veterinarian. You can check out the full upcoming schedule of guests on reefbum.com under the YouTube section. Until then, be safe and be well.